Good morning. Happy sunny Thursday. My name is Kobe Flatt, and this is the MEL3E, the Grade 11 Math for Everyday Life course. We are at the end of our 6th week, meaning that we have just 3 weeks left before the end of term, going into our summer break. Today, we are going to jump into lesson 13. Yesterday, we covered lesson 12, talking about loans. We discussed types of borrowing. We looked at loans versus credit cards versus lines of credit. We talked about the dangers of payday loans and check cashing places. And we reviewed the cost of loans. We were then introduced to amortization schedules, which show how much of your payment goes towards paying off the loan, that principal, that initial borrowed lump sum, and how much pays off the interest. It's a beautiful way to keep it clearly organized and helps us to really break down where our payments are going. Today, we are going to go, feels like in a completely different direction. We have been working on lessons that build up to lesson 7, introduced us to lesson 8, which bridged us to lesson 9, and then we used that to talk about 11 and 12. And now today, lesson 13 looks at driver's licenses. We're going to be talking about the licensing system and insurance. It's a little bit of a break from all of the compound interest and heavy banking stuff. We will explore the process of obtaining a driver's license in Ontario, gain an understanding of the different classes of licensing, as well as the demerit point system and fines that are set in place. Our learning goals for today are that we will understand the procedures in the Ontario graduated licensing system. We'll be able to calculate costs of speeding tickets, including demerit points, and understand the costs, privileges, and restrictions in obtaining an Ontario driver's license. We'll know we have met the goals because we'll be able to explain the steps involved in getting a full license in Ontario. We'll be able to calculate demerit points, fees, and surcharges for various traffic violations. And lastly, hopefully we have enough time to get to it. A little bit of a late start today with our NAN micro-credential happening Thursday mornings, but hopefully we can get into explaining why insurance is necessary and how rates can be increased or decreased, that's lowered. To start our class, our mindful math for the day, I have some Ontario driving statistics. I'm not going to get into all of it because of our time crunch, but I thought it was interesting to pull up some stats. Now these are from 2022 that talk about the road fatalities and fatal collisions that occur by month. I wanted to pull these up to let you know that this is our Math for Everyday Life course, and this is something that most of us do every day. We're driving. We want to know the costs of driving. Sometimes it's a fee, it's a fine, sometimes it's something much heavier. And not to start our sunny day with something so dark, but important to know that inattentive driving, that's when you're not paying attention, when you could be occupied with kids in the back or changing the radio station or texting and driving, we're looking at 16.4% of total fatalities are caused by inattentive driving. 17.7% are speed-related collisions. Moving over to the fatalities and injuries during collisions by month, most of us might assume that January would be the highest, or December when we're thinking of those winter snow roads, ice-covered roads, when really, if you look over at the side where it has total. Now, another reason why I'm bringing this up is because we're practicing reading tables. We practiced reading spreadsheets for interest. We practiced reading amortization tables. Being able to read tables with numbers is an important skill so that you can gain information from it. So looking at the second table that we have on the screen here in front of me, it has month of occurrence, number of fatalities, number of personal injuries, and then total, how many collisions sort of took place by month. Now this was in 2022. But if you look on the side, you'll see January had 1,704, December had 1,726, February, another snowy month, 1,844. But if you go down and you look for the largest number, what's the biggest number? We have 22, 24, 23. If we look at the highest one, 2,482 collisions actually took place in the month of July. I don't know if that's shocking to anyone else. That was shocking to me, thinking, but there's no ice on the road. There's no really bad weather that happens. Well, looking back to our first table, where we see that the majority of accidents take place with large truck collisions, the second highest is speed related. And we can draw a conclusion that when it's winter, we do tend to drive a little bit more carefully. We do tend to be aware of the ice on the road and the snow blinding us, reducing visibility. We often feel safest in the summer. It's a nice day, the sun is shining, we maybe have the windows down, radio blaring, and that tends to get us a little heavy-footed. And because we think it's safe, because there's no ice on the road, a lot of those speed-related collisions are happening in the summer. So just some practice for reading tables and charts. The next graphic that I have that we're not going to look at too closely is just fun fact, collisions involving injury by driver, gender. So the majority of accidents are, we have males 57%, followed by females 37%, and unknown by 6%. Let's jump into our material. If you turn to page 21 of your IL booklet, you will see that as of April 1st, 1994, all new drivers applying for their first car or motorcycle license enter into Ontario's graduated licensing system. The graduated licensing lets new drivers get driving experience and skills gradually. It's a way to not just throw them on the road where they could become a statistic of fatality or injuries. We want them to be safe, and we want others around them on the road to be safe as well. Because of this gradual release, Ontario has a two-step licensing process. Usually takes a minimum of 20 months to complete, but you do have a total of 5 years. So the fastest you can get it done in 20 months, but you can draw it out over 5 years. So what are these two-tier process system? The first is Class G1. A new driver must hold a G1 license for a minimum of 12 months before attempting the G1 road test. This is why we have that minimum. The quickest you can get it done is 20 months because you have to have a G1 license for at least 12 months. That's at least 1 year. Now, that having been said, the time can be reduced to 8 months if you successfully complete an approved driver education course. So here's a little plug for education courses, driving education courses. The first is it can speed up the time you get your license, and the second is that it often counts as a discount. It reduces your insurance, which we're going to get into at the end of this class. Seeing that you have to have your G1 for at least 12 months unless you're doing the education course, it's 8 months, you then move to the class G2. New drivers must hold a G2 license for a minimum of 12 months. So here is the 12 months regardless of whether or not you took the driver education course. 12 plus 8 is 20. That's why our minimum is 20 months. Normal would be 2 years. 12 and 12 is 24, but it can be drawn out over 5 years. So G1, 8 months, G2, 12 months before you can even attempt the road test. Now, as a G1 driver, that's that first stage, you are required to maintain a 0 blood alcohol level while driving. You must be accompanied by a fully licensed driver for at least 4 years. So somebody who has had their G2, they're fully licensed for at least 4 years. If you're going with your big brother or sister or cousin who is now fully licensed, that's great for them, but they don't count unless they've had it for 4 years. G1 drivers must also ensure the number of passengers in the vehicle is limited to the number of working seat belts. That's the key word. You might have 5 seat belts and one's kind of broken. Then you cannot have 5 passengers. If you only have 4 working seat belts, you can only have 4 passengers. G1 drivers must also refrain from driving between the hours of midnight and 5 a.m. You have a curfew if you are a new driver. You cannot be driving between midnight and 5 a.m. You must also refrain, that means you cannot drive on Ontario's 400 series highways. The 401, the 411, the 427, any of those 400 series. You also cannot be on high-speed expressways. That would be roads that have speed limits of 90 kilometers or more, or those large roads that have multi-lanes. The only time you're allowed on these roads is if you are accompanied by a licensed driving instructor. Keyword instructor, not somebody who's a licensed driver for 4 years, has to be a licensed driving instructor. If you have or when you have your G2 license, you are required to maintain a 0 blood alcohol level while driving. Ensure the number of passengers in the vehicle is limited to the number of working seatbelts. You may, however, drive without an accompanying driver on all Ontario roads at any time. Your curfew has been lifted, but you still have to have 0 blood alcohol level and number of working seatbelts for each passenger. My next slide has a visual on what the requirements are for having a Class G license. A Class G license is required if you plan on driving a car, van, small truck. This is the first license that you need to obtain before you qualify to drive any other kind of vehicle. In order to get it, you must be at least 16 years old. You must meet the vision standards, which are established by the Ministry of Transportation. You must pass a knowledge test, which reviews the rules of the road, signs you'll come across. You have to know what those are. Lastly, you must pass 2 road tests, classes G2 and G, to become fully licensed. So we have the initial stages G1, G2, and now you have this G as well. So to obtain the G, you have to study for your knowledge test. It's a written test. You have to apply for a license at the Drive Test Center. You have to take your vision test. You have to pay the fees at the Drive Test Center, complete and pass the written test. Then you get your temporary driver's license. You can practice driving with your Class G1. Remember, that's with a fully licensed driver who's been driving, has been fully licensed for at least 4 years. Then, after either 8 months if you took the education class, or 12 months, you can book a road test. And with your road test, if you pass, you get your Class G2. With the G2, you practice your driving. You still have some restrictions on you. You still have to have 0 blood alcohol level and the number of working seatbelts, but you don't have that curfew anymore. Once you've done that for 12 months, Remember, it doesn't matter if you did the education classes or not, you have to drive for a minimum of 12 months. Then you get to book a road test and take your Class G. Once you've successfully passed that, yay, congratulations, you can go and enjoy your license. A few things that you might want to know are on the board. I created a visual that you can see. I didn't actually create this, I grabbed this snapshot. And you can look at that, you can go back, watch the recording, pause it. I'm going to keep moving on to get into the actual material of our course today. It starts with the chart with the table on page 22 of your IL booklet. You need to know how to read this table to answer your key questions. We've been practicing reading tables, so here we have again. To get the Class G1 license package, it's going to cost $159.75. With that, you get the knowledge test, a Class G2 road test, 5-year license. This you will have to pay when you go in. Then maybe you failed the knowledge test and you have to write it again. If you have to go back and write it again, it's $16. To get just the G2 road test, maybe you passed the written but didn't pass the road test, then you're going to have to pay extra. To get the 5-year license, you have to pay, so it kind of breaks it down into a full package, but in case any of them were missed or failed, then those are the individual prices. You can check out the rest of them on page 22. We are going to jump into demerit points. Demerit points are a way for the Ontario Ministry of Transportation, that's the MTO, to monitor your driving. All individuals who drive a vehicle in Ontario are subject to this system only when they are convicted of an offense under the Highway Traffic Act. It looks like this. Demerit points are added if you are found guilty of a traffic ticket offense. Now, how much is added, the amount, depends on the charge. Everyone starts with 0, you add them up. Kind of like golf, you want the lower score. You want nothing. If you obtain too many points, there is a possibility that you could lose your license. Again, you start with 0. The maximum is 15. You go up to 15. Once you hit 15, there are some things that come along with it, even before then. And we'll break those down as we go through the lesson. It's important to note that a demerit point will stay on your record for a maximum of 2 years from the offense date. Once 2 years have passed, they will automatically be removed from your record. Now, don't assume that if the demerit points are not written on the ticket, that there are no points associated with the charge. That's not what that means. They don't actually, a police officer doesn't have to write down the demerit points because that's the way of the Ontario Ministry of Transportation to track, not necessarily OPP, for instance. So don't assume if there's no demerit points written that you're not going to get them. Be mindful of that. Here we go, breaking down how they are applied. If you are a G1 or a G2 driver, remember this is your starting stage. We're building up to the fully licensed G. If you get 2 to 5 demerit points, you will be sent a warning letter. You might even have to attend an interview hearing. They are very proactive in getting on top of new drivers who have these bad habits and are getting fined. If you are a new driver with a G1 or G2 and you get 6 to 8 demerit points, your license could be suspended. Now, you could either be hit with a 30-day suspension or a 60-day suspension. If you are convicted of a 4 or more demerit point traffic ticket, you will get a 30-day suspension. If you receive 9 or more demerit points, you will receive a 60-day suspension. Now, once you are fully licensed, once you have your G class, 2 to 8 demerit points, you just get a warning letter. As opposed to the new drivers who, once they're at 8 demerit points, they could be suspended. We're assuming now that you're a better driver, you have a little bit more experience, we're going to give you a little more leeway. So you get a warning letter if you receive 2 to 8 demerit points. If you receive 9 to 14 demerit points, then your license can be suspended. You might have to attend an interview to discuss your record. If you get 15 or more demerit points, then you are given a 30-day license suspension. Let's break down the different reasons for traffic infractions. The first is speeding penalties. If you look in your aisle booklet, you will see how you get each demerit point. It lists on page 22 to 23, and then it does go over to page 24. All of the demerits, how you get demerits, why you get demerits, what the demerits are applied to. Make sure you're reading the titles to ensure that when you answer your key question, you are applying it to the proper driver holding the proper license. So the first is just if you get these demerit points. The next is penalties for demerit points with a full license, and the last table is penalties for demerit points for new drivers. Then it goes into how do you surrender a license, what happens if your license is surrendered. On page 26, we look at the speeding penalties. You will see the very first table talks about normal speeding penalties if you're in a regular driving area. If you speed 1 to 19 kilometers over, you get charged $2.50 per kilometer per hour that you go over. So if you are speeding by 14 kilometers, it would be $2.50 times the 14 kilometers that you went over. If you're speeding 20 to 34 kilometers more than the speed limit, you're going to get fined $3.75. So if I'm speeding by 23 kilometers, I have to pay 23 kilometers per hour times the $3.75. So yeah, it adds up. It hurts. If you are speeding 35 to 49 kilometers per hour, you will be charged $6 per kilometer that you went over the speed limit. If you're speeding by more than 50 kilometers per hour over the speed limit, minimum you have to pay is $7,000. It could be way more than that. They could even just take your vehicle. That's the possible seizure of a vehicle. Now, you'll notice underneath that is a second table. Speeding penalties in a community safety zone. You will most likely see this sign. Sometimes it will say community safety zone, fines increased. Community safety zones can also include other areas like a school zone. You want to make sure that you're paying attention to those signs. Often construction sites say fines will be doubled. You want to pay attention to that because in community safety zones, you'll notice the difference if you are speeding. In a normal zone, 1 to 19 kilometers over, it was $2.50. But now if you're speeding 1 to 19 kilometers per hour over the speed limit in a community safety zone, it's $5 per kilometer per hour that you went over, so doubled. In a community safety zone, if you are traveling 20 to 34 kilometers over, it's $7.50. If you are speeding by 35 to 49 kilometers per hour over, there's just no out-of-court settlement. You're kind of hoopty-dooped. Now, in your key question, it is going to ask you to total the cost of the fine. It is very important to know, and I know that lesson 13 is kind of reading heavy. There's a lot of information in there, which is why I want to break it all down for you. You'll see underneath the speeding penalties listed on page 26 of your IL booklet, we have victim's surcharge. Then over on the next page, the top of page 27 has court costs. Sometimes this gets lost in all of the charts and tables that are in this lesson. It is important to note that these also make up your fine. When you get ticketed, it's not just this is how much you were speeding by. You will also be charged a victim's surcharge and court costs. I'm going to say it now and I'll say it again at the end. When you are completing your key question and it asks, calculate the cost of the speeding fine, you are going to have to do the speeding ticket calculations, the victim's surcharge, the court costs, and the demerits. Each one is going to need those 4 separate costs. Let's find out how to calculate victim surcharge. On page 26, you will see the victim surcharge. This is a fee that is added to every single speeding ticket fine you receive. This fee, this charge that they add, funds the Victim Justice Fund, which was developed to assist victims of crime. It's part of your penalty. You speed, we're going to take a fee and give it to this Victim Justice Fund, who's going to help victims of crime. It's part of your cost. You first need to find out what is your speeding fine. So step 1, find speeding fine charges or charge. Once you have that, then step 2 is to add the surcharge. If my speeding fine charges were $62, say I got charged $62, I then look at the first column, which is the set fine, and I find $62 falls within the $51 to $75 range. That means that my added victim's surcharge is going to be $15. So I would add $62 plus the $15, and then you'll see on the next slide we have to add the court cost. So step 1, find your speeding fine charges. Step 2, find where your victim fine surcharge lands. You'll see the table listed on the bottom of page 26. I have it here on the board that if your fine is just $0 to $50, your surcharge is $10. If you're 51 to 75, it's 15. If you're 76 to 100, it's 20, etc., etc. You'll notice at the end of the table, the very last row, if your set fine is over $1,000, the victim's surcharge fee will be 25% of whatever your set fine is. Then the third and last part of the financial charge are the court costs. This is on page 27 at the very top. The charge received when you are handed a ticket automatically comes with a court cost. You get handed a ticket, you get an automatic court cost. If you do not appear in court, then you can accrue the following. You'll see on the page, on the top of page 27, you are charged $5 when an officer hands you a traffic ticket. Automatically, extra $5. The amount is added to the total payable if you were given a summons. Now, other possible court costs are added if you do not appear in court, but are convicted anyway. We see the very first line, for service of offense, notice or summons, you get that automatic $5. If you fail to respond to the Part 1 offense notice, you will get charged $5. If you fail to appear at the Part 1 trial, you get charged $10. If you fail to respond to a Part 2 offense notice, you're going to get charged an extra $3.75. If you fail to respond to a Part 2 notice of impending conviction, you're going to get $16 added on. If you fail to appear at a Part 2 trial, you could be charged $12.75. If you fail to appear at a Part 3 trial, you could get charged $30. When you're reading your key question, you're going to want to pay attention to any of these stipulations, but note that automatically, whenever you receive a ticket, you automatically get that $5 court cost fee. Threw a lot of information at you, threw it out there quite quickly because I wanted to make sure I could get it all in. Let's practice calculating the total cost of a fine. Here on the board, I have example 1, and it's a lot like the one in your key question. It asks us to calculate the total cost of the speeding fines and the number of demerits. If it doesn't say demerits in your key question, add them anyway. I'm pretty sure I did write them so that it always says how many demerit points as well. You need to always keep in mind that the total cost, kind of like our total cost of borrowing, remember it's not just, oh, I borrowed $200,000 for my mortgage, I'm going to have to pay $200,000. No, there's more that comes with it. Same as with a speeding ticket. So let's practice. Calculate the total cost of the speeding fines and the number of demerits when speeding by 42 kilometers per hour. That means that we went over the speed limit by 42 kilometers per hour. We first want to ask, where are we speeding? Are we speeding in a construction zone, school zone, safety community zone, or just on a normal road? This one does not tell us, so we can assume that we are maybe speeding on the highway. Maybe we're on Highway 17 and we go to pass a truck on the road and we need to build up speed, so we're speeding by 42 kilometers per hour. We then look at our set fine. Because we're speeding by 42 kilometers, we fall into this third bracket. The kilometers per hour over the limit is 35 to 49. We fall in there at 42, which means we need to apply $6 to every kilometer we went over. This one gives it to us. We don't have to calculate how many we went over. This one says we sped by 42 kilometers per hour over the limit. So step 1 is to calculate that fine. 42 kilometers per hour over times $6. That is going to add up, and it sure does. That gives us $252. That's just for speeding. But we know that that is simply our set fine. Step 2 is to determine victim's surcharge. Oh my goodness. What is happening with my board? I'm not sure why it just changed on me, but we're going to make this go back and back to where we were. Here we go. Let's try this again. Okay, victim surcharge. Sorry about that, team. So step 2, calculate victim surcharge. We have to look at the set fine. So this is step 1, this is step 2. Victim set fine. Our set fine is $252. That falls within our first bracket, $252, which means our added surcharge, the victim surcharge, is $60. Then we know every time we are handed a ticket, step 3, is the court cost, and that's an automatic $5. It doesn't tell us anything about failing to appear, blah, 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 so we're just going to keep it at $5. We want to add our total cost, total monetary cost, because we're not done. So we need to add $252 plus $60 plus $5. We get $317 that we have to pay for speeding by 42 kilometers. The last part of the cost are our demerit points. If we look at the table on pages 23 to 24, we want to know what happens if we are speeding by 42 kilometers. So you kind of go through and you look at, all right, 6 demerit points if you exceed the speed limit by 50 kilometers per hour or more. That's not us. We're under 50. So we're going to keep going down the list. 4 demerit points will be added if you are convicted of exceeding the speed limit by 30 to 49 kilometers per hour. That's us. We sped by 42. We fit in that range. That means it's going to cost us 4 demerit points. It's a word problem, so we need to have a therefore sentence. Therefore, the fine is $317 plus 4 demerit points. Now you also want to make sure that it's telling you if you're a new driver or not. Remember, if you're a new driver and you exceed the speed limit by a certain amount, then you will have to have different things added to it. If it doesn't tell you, you can just assume that you are a fully licensed G driver. You want to be careful that you are reading all the different information. It's a lot of page flipping, but essentially you want to make sure that you have these 4 steps to complete the question. So step 1, find your set fine. Step 2, use the set fine to find your victim surcharge. Step 3, calculate your court costs. And step 4, find how many demerit points. Let's try one more. And then we should have time to get to the insurance part of it still. The second example is to calculate the cost of the speeding fines, but this time it's telling us that we are speeding by 25 kilometers per hour in a community safety zone. So remember, speeding fines means everything. Means dollar amount and demerit points. So even though this one doesn't specifically say the demerit points, we know that's part of the total cost. So step 1. Step 1, let's find our set fine. It's different for a community safety zone. So you want to make sure you're looking at the proper table. If we're speeding in a community safety zone, we look at that second table where our fines are more, they're increased. If we're speeding by 25, we fall into the second bracket, which is $7.50. Again, it's telling us specifically how much we went over by, so we just have to calculate 25 kilometers per hour times $7.50. So we find 25 kilometers per hour times $7.50. We owe $187.50. Step 2, use that number as your set fine to find your victim surcharge. $187 leaves us in this bracket where our victim surcharge is $35. And step 3 is the court costs. It's not telling us that we're missing anything, so that's just going to be an automatic $5. So now we can add up our total money amount. We're going to do $187.50 plus $35 victim surcharge plus $5 court cost. We will have to pay $227.50. But step 4 is to find the demerits. We want to make sure that we are reading the proper section. And we find that if we're speeding by 25 kilometers over, we will owe, or will have 3 points against us, 3 points added to our tally. Therefore, the total cost of this fine is $227.50 and 3 demerit points. So yes, this lesson is a little bit reading heavy. It's a little bit flipping back and forth, making sure that you're paying attention to each of the headings, that you're talking about the proper license. If it doesn't tell you, you can assume that you've got a G license. If it does tell you, make sure you're paying attention to, is it G1 or G2? If it doesn't tell you about your court infractions, you can just assume all that's happened is you've been handed the ticket, which is an automatic $5. But follow the 4 steps. Find your set fine. Use the set fine to find your victim surcharge. Add the court cost and find out how many demerits. You will have to go through the table. On page 22, it starts at 7 demerit points and it works its way down to 2 demerit points on page 23. We don't have enough time to get into our insurance. We will have to pick that up on Monday when we come back. If you want to practice calculating all of the court costs, the speeding fines, I should say, which includes the court costs, the victim surcharge, the speeding penalties, you can go to page 28 and practice support questions 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's going to help you read through information to find the answer that you need. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. We will see you back Monday.